Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. All praises are Allah's, Lord of the worlds, and may His peace and blessings be upon our Master, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, and his pure immaculate Ahlul Bayt. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So inshallah, we'll start our discussions on Mahdism or Messianism. And this in itself may take 10 or 20 lectures, but inshallah the start would have been done in Al-Wilayah, inshallah. We'll take that as a good omen. There are a number of introductory concepts though one has to bear in mind. And in this lecture, primarily, I want to introduce you to these concepts before we get to the main discussions. But if you understand these concepts, this will stay with you until the end. And these are good concepts to acknowledge in order to absorb many of the higher realities in Islam, in our aqaid. These concepts will help, inshallah. Okay. So when discussing the prophets, when discussing the imams, we're discussing man's identity. We're endeavoring to find out what is man. Man sometimes manifests Ibrahimi style, sometimes Isa alayhi salam style. Man has a Husseini dimension, a Qasimi dimension, and so on and so forth. We don't need to confine the stories of the Quran to a particular specific narrative of the texts. There's a bigger picture at play, and that's to unfold the reality of man, to see what this human soul is, what its identity is, where its identity lies. Man has a lofty station which needs to be explored. Now, the soul has differing states, layers and dimensions, and the Quran unravels the soul and discloses and manifests all the soul's potentials, from the very bad to the very good. It's all verse after verse disclosing the states of man. Then when we read the Quran and the verses, we have to relate or take heed and so on. The Imams too, the story of the Imams, the same philosophy applies. It's the story of man. Now they're all given these different titles like Sajjad, Baqir, and so on and so forth, telling us that we have the potential to be Sajjad, Baqir, Sadiq, Kadhim. When we are located in X, Y, or Z environment, it's all a story of man growing, the journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why the stories of the prophets and imams are important. And that's why the study of the 12th imam has to be of importance to us. His titles have to be explored, because that too is the story of man, the story of the soul, how it grows. Now, the most spiritual creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that of our Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Quran in its entirety is tantamount to the Holy Prophet's Mi'raj. And last night, I used the term the Quran being a product of the soul of the Holy Prophet. That doesn't mean that the words that the Holy Prophet would utter are his own words. It's a product of the Holy Prophet's Mi'raj. The Mi'raj, the Holy Ascension, being the Holy Prophet's existential journeying to Allah. The reason we have different books and different shariahs is a function of the difference of the quality and degree of the mi'rajes of certain prophets and people. All prophets would undergo mi'raj. Some of them who are entitled the Ulul Azm, the possessors of resolution, strong will, their mi'raj was higher than the rest. Even between those 5 Ulul Azm, messengers of Allah, there's a difference between them. They're all ma'soom, but even within infallibility and ismat, there are degrees. The degrees of ismat is because of the degree of mi'raj and ascension to Allah. The differences of the degree of mi'raj between them leads to a difference in the degree of ismat, some being higher than the other. The reason we have book after book, religion after religion, is also because of the differences of the degree of ascension that the prophets had, the Ulul Azm prophets. Each prophet who brought a book which was a result of their mi'raj, that book, which is a product of the mi'raj of that prophet, is the potential which that prophet realized fully, and it's the potential that the members of the ummah of that prophet can reach. So Prophet Musa alayhi salam revealed a book. He underwent a mi'raj, ascended. He received, when he transcended the different realms of existences, he received abstract divine data, and with that he converted it into words of that book, and that was the Torah. Although there's one discussion which I don't really want to enter here because one would, divert too much. It's the question of did all the books involve and entail angelic intermediary? And Al-Wilayah didn't believe that. Only with our Holy Prophet there was an angelic intermediary. That's why the Quran was a miracle. The Quran will stay until the end. The others weren't regarded as a miracle. Now, I've spoken about this before. With your permission, I don't want to really speak as a different topic. But Imam Khomeini believes that the difference of shariahs, the difference of books that we have, the reason we have these books coming one after the other, shariahs coming one after the other, is because of the difference of the mi'raj of those prophets. Now, 2 things have to be covered here. When Prophet Musa alayhi salam comes with his book, that book is a product of his mi'raj. He has realized the maximum of that book, and he he's the prophet of the people at that time. The members of the Ummah of Musa alayhi salam, the book of Musa is the potential they can all acquire unity with. The members of Musa, of the Ummah of Musa, they can reach potentially, if they strive hard, the maximum that the book of Musa has to offer. Prophet Isa, the same philosophy applies. The members of the Ummah of Isa can reach that potential, that maximum that the book of Isa has to offer. Now, between the Ulul Azm prophets, when we say some are higher than the other, is because one of them underwent a higher mi'raj, acquired a closer proximity to Allah, and the result was now a new book for a new people. And then another prophet came many years later, a stronger mi'raj, product of the soul of that prophet. There was still room for spiritual elevation. New prophet came, new book. The book was revelation, product of the mi'raj of that prophet with the people of that time. And those people can acquire the maximum of that book. But then our prophet came. Now the reason why we say Islam is the last religion is because the mi'raj which our prophet realized was infinite in nature. There can't be a higher mi'raj than the nature and degree of mi'raj that the Holy Prophet underwent. And because of that, we believe that this book is the last book. So it's all to do with the degree of mi'raj between the prophets. And we, as members of the Ummah, of the Muhammadan Ummah, we can acquire unity and access to the potential that the Quran has within it, which is much higher than the potential previous Ummahs had. That's worthy to note. Now, the perfect man, the Prophet or Imam, is a manifestation of all divine attributes. And therefore, as a result of this, is an intermediary between haqq and khalaq. Prophets, Imams, or perfect human beings, are intermediaries between truth and creation, between Allah and other than Allah, or people. They're intermediaries. Now this concept of being an intermediary is important. And this, if you acknowledge and understand this, it will be of benefit for many discussions in our aqaid. It's a key to solving many dilemmas that we come across in the Quran, that at face value it seems problematic even when we read the verses, but this is a very important key. So, to be such an intermediary between Allah and creation, between the truth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and creation, one has to embrace both the haqqi dimensions, the godly dimensions, the spiritual dimensions, and the khalaqi, creation, or worldly dimensions. One has to embrace both. And in chapter 18, 110, the last verse of the Surah Al-Kahf, قُلْ إِنَّمَا أَنَا بَشَرٌ مِثْلُكُمْ. I'm only a human being, بَشَرٌ مِثْلُكُمْ. مثلكم, like you. That's the khalqi dimension, the worldly, creation-orientated dimension that they embraced, the Holy Prophet embraced, and prophets, perfect people. Yuha ilayya, it's revealed to me, though. That's the haqqi dimension, the revelation dimension, the spiritual dimension. To be an intermediary, you have to embrace both. Now this has to be explored more. In Irfani terminology, extrapolated from the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt, acting as intermediaries, acting as in-betweens. There's a term that they call such people barzakhs. Now, don't automatically go to the barzakh which we usually refer to and associate with. These people, these in-betweens, these intermediaries between the haqqi, spiritual, godly dimension and the worldly, created dimension, these are called barzakhs. And they're called barzakhs because of that in-between nature that they have. Between what? Those two realms of existences, the haqqi and the khalqi. And the reason we also call barzakh, i.e. between this world and qiyamah, because in qiyamah it's an immaterial world. In this world it's a material world. Barzakh is in between these two realms of existences. It's a semi-immaterial realm, like what we see in our dreams. That's the barzakhi realm. And it shares both of its sides. It has the immaterial nature, there's no matter in it, but it also has the material dimension. There's color, size, shape, and so on and so forth. It embraces both dimensions that it lies between. Prophets, imams, perfect people, perfect souls are also termed barzakhs because they embrace the haqqi, yuha ilayya dimension, and they have the worldly, created dimension. Basharun mithlukum, they're human beings like me and you. They embrace both, and as intermediaries, as in-betweens, they're called barzakh. Possessing both attributes of both sides. Now, these barzakhs, meaning that being an intermediary, there are two forms. There's the dhulmani barzakh, the dark barzakh. It's negative, it's oppressive in nature. And then there's the nurani, luminous barzakh. With the dhulmani, dark barzakh, is when something is an in-between, between two things, and it prevents those two things that this is lying in between to get into union with one another. So for example, this is just an example, like this finger, the middle finger, would be a dark barzakh between this ring finger and the index finger. It doesn't let these two come together. Whereas with the luminous barzakhs, it allows the two entities that it's lying in between to acquire union with one another. So, an example of the luminous barzakh would be the imams and the prophets, the perfect human souls, where they allow Allah, the haqqi dimension, the spiritual side, to be in union with creation. Because they share both the basharun mithlukum aspect and they have the divinely aspect associated with them. And they become intermediaries between God and the people. God and creation. God is the most immaterial of the immaterial. We people in this world, creation, it's the dunya, the most inferior of the material. Here, what is required is a barzakh. Because God doesn't come, with 2 legs or 2 arms, or it doesn't come with any figure or body to speak or communicate. He's the most immaterial of the immaterial. For this union between creation and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there has to be an intermediary. And this intermediary is the Prophet, the Imam, the perfect soul, allowing this union to take place. And Allah's intermediaries, therefore, are called barzakhs. Between these 2 realms, contact becomes enabled for it to happen. Another example they give is when someone is in the state of intizar, those final breaths of life. He's still alive, but he's going to die any minute. He's undergoing his final breaths of life. He's also basharun mithlukum, he has a physical body. During intizar, when definitive death is to result, one sees the metaphysical realities. One is now embracing both of those dimensions, the haqqi and the khalqi dimensions once again. But that person, he may be a good person or a bad person. But if you abide by the formula which we covered last night, mutu qabla an tamutu, die a spiritual death before that physical death, then you become an intermediary. Because you've acquired unity with that haqqi realm. You're beginning now to deserve to act as an intermediary between Allah and the people. How does one become an intermediary between the 2 dimensions, the haqqi spiritual dimension and the created dimension, the worldly dimension? We have a tradition that says, لا يلج ملكوت السماوات والأرض من لم يولد مرتين. One who's not born twice will not have access to the dominions of the heavens and the earth. You have to be born twice. Being born twice is something specific to humans. Animals don't have that. Well, we're all born once. This second birth all depends on us having a spiritual death, after which we have our second birth. So this tradition also is a commentary to mutu qabla an tamutu. It's all about transcending the realms of existence. It's closer and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, as intermediaries, these are just introductory comments. as intermediaries, Nurani barzakhs. These people have two roles and functions. The first is that they act as Allah's mirror before creation. They act as Allah's mirror to the people. They manifest divine traits to creation, to the people. They express higher realities. They express perfection to the people. They're Allah's mirror to the people. They're reflecting that Allahliness to the people. Because they embrace both aspects, we said. The haqqi and the khalqi. So they come with a message to the people. Sorry. That's one role. The second role is they act as the people's mirror to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. See? Because they're intermediaries now. It's a two-way process. Now they've acquired a certain status out of spirituality. They become intermediaries between Allah and the people. Haqq and khalq. Truth and creation. And whatever name you want to give it. They act as Allah's mirror to the people. They come to the people after undergoing the Mi'raj with a message to reach Allah, a message to perfection. But they act as a mirror, as the people's mirror to Allah. Now this is very delicate too. Where the people's mirror to Allah, taking to Allah the people's weaknesses, taking to Allah the people's inabilities, the people's corruptive side. They're prophets of the people, they're imams of the time. That's what they do. They're intermediaries between Allah and the people. From Allah to the people, they come with a message, with a book, so that we become perfected. As people's mirror to Allah, being with the people, being their prophet, being their imam, being their guide, being their hujjah. It doesn't have to be a prophet or an imam. You can be a hujjat and not be a prophet and an imam. لولا الحجة لساخت الأرض. If there's no hujjah, the earth will perish. That it says hujjah. It doesn't say لولا الإمام. It doesn't say لولا النبي. This is important. Although we won't, I'm not sure if we'll get to this stage, but with the martyrdom of the 12th Imam, it doesn't mean everything will be destroyed. Of course, there'll still remain hujjas on earth. The Imam was always in contact with circles of people, be they the 4 Otad, the 40 Abdal, and so on and so forth. Not only are they hujjas, they're more than hujjas. They've been stronger than the previous prophets. So they act, in this second phase, they act as people's mirror to Allah. And they disclose man's corruptive nature, man's weaknesses, man's inabilities, depending on the tribe at that time, what the tribe was. Takes it to Allah to then receive a protocol for those people. Depending on what the weakness, the inability of that people was. It varies. And then from Allah he gets the message, he comes back to the people again, an intermediary, a luminous barzakh between these two realms. So, When Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam says, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, when he says, I am the throne, I am the arsh, or I am the qalam, I am the pen, or I am the kursi, the chair, or I am this attribute, that attribute. When Amirul Mu'mineen, what he's showing us here is that he's reflecting to us who are beneath him, confined to this khalqi dimension. He's reflecting to us those divine names and truths of Allah that are incorporated within his existence, within the existence of Amirul Mu'mineen. As a manifester of Allah's names, Amirul Mu'mineen's manifesting Allah through his own existence, manifesting all divine attributes to the people through himself. But in reality, he is not expressing the attributes of the essence of the Imam, because he's an intermediary. He's not saying that all these attributes are attributed to me, Amirul Mu'mineen. That's not the case. He's manifesting attributes and names, and when he says, I am the pen, I am everything, he's not attributing this to the essence of himself. Rather, in reality, he's attributing it to that essence that he is dependent upon. He's attributing that which Amirul Mu'mineen depends upon, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now here, in Arabic rhetoric, sometimes they give the sentence and say that, for example, John is scholarly, or John is a scholar. When people, this is the Arabic of 1400 years ago, medieval Arabic, when they would say John is a scholar, this could be understood in two ways. There's an essence called John, a concrete essence, an individual, and you attribute being scholarly to this concrete person. And we have that in English. I think all languages have it. But sometimes when you say John is a scholar, you're attributing being scholarly to that which John depends upon. John was a student of a very strong scholar, for example. And when you hear that he was a student of this scholar, you say John is scholarly. John is a scholar. But this being scholarly, you're attributing to that entity which John depends upon, who is that Ustad of John, not to John himself. Is that clear, inshallah? Yes, because although there's one other example I'll give later too. It's this in relation to perfect souls, in relation to prophets, imams, proofs of Allah. It's this second form of addressing attributes which is the norm. So when prophets or imams, when they're described with these holy titles, they're not attributed to the imams, to the prophets themselves. They're attributed to that entity which the imams depend upon, and that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After all, imams, prophets, they're servants of Allah. They're poor, they're needy, they're weak, they're subservient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's a result of that subservience, that utter neediness that they see before the Almighty, that they ascend spiritually. But they're only intermediaries. But they acquired that status. Although the discussion of infallibility I will discuss inshallah in the next 1 or 2 days. It's something which hasn't been really properly explained. And the books in Aqa'id, they do explain it, but for some reason people are not understanding it properly, and then these dilemmas and shubahat come, and then they suddenly have nothing to say. But it's an important theme that I'll touch upon inshallah. And the code for that lies in Ziyarat Waris. But inshallah that one will come to later. So, whatever they have is from Allah. These holy attributes, when we describe the imams with these titles, or when they describe it to themselves and say, I am this, I am that, they're not attributing it to themselves. They're attributing it to that entity which they depend upon. Otherwise, they always act on a par with Allah's will. They never say anything of their own liking. Chapter 53, verses 3 and 4. وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَى. They don't speak of their own liking. This is in relation to the Holy Prophet and all the Ma'asumeen. He doesn't speak of his own liking. إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَى. It's just revelation being revealed. Whatever they say is out of revelation. Be it the legislative revelation, which was the Holy Quran, or the non-legislative revelation, which was words outside the Quran. But they were also revealed, but in a different manner to how the Quran was revealed. There was no angelic intermediary there, but it was a result of their mi'raj. So when Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I am X attribute or Y attribute, it's because he's a luminous barzakh, being a mirror to Allah's beauty and reflecting Allah's beauty and other attributes. Now, the example that the scholars give is the example of the moon. This is another example they give for us to understand this. And that is, the moon is a barzakh between the sun and the earth. Now you have to bear with me with this example. When the moon says, for example, or when it's said of the moon, that the moon provides the people on earth with light at night time. The moon is providing light to the people. In reality, this attribute of giving light is predicated, is attributed to that which the moon depends upon, and that's the sun. The moon doesn't have any light out of its own self. It doesn't provide light. This provision of light is not attributed to the concrete essence of the moon. We don't see the sun at night, and then we just see the moon, and then we may think that the moon is providing light. But the moon, this providing of light, isn't attributed to the essence of the moon. It's attributed to that which the moon depends upon, and that's the sun. The moon is an intermediary between the sun and earth. It gets light from the sun, gives it to the khalqi dimension, the people on earth. Okay? Remember the two functions of the prophets. They act as Allah's mirror. The moon gets Light from the sun reflects it to the people. But then the Prophet, we said, acts as the people's mirror too, above. The moon, you may say, becomes dark, becomes covered. But here, this covering of the moon, this darkness of the moon, isn't attributed to the essence of the moon again, but rather it's the shadow of the earth which is covering it. But we say the moon is covered with darkness. The moon is an intermediary here. Sun, people on earth, or earth. Gets light from the sun, passes it down to people on earth. The light isn't attributed to the essence though, it just reflects a higher reality. From earth, it acquires darkness, it becomes covered in darkness. That covering of darkness is not attributed though to the moon itself. It's the shadow of earth which covers the moon. So when the moon says, I'm covered in darkness, this is an attribute of earth. When the moon says, I'm spreading light, it's an attribute of the sun. The moon is an intermediary, embracing both dimensions. Now this is important. If you've understood that, especially the last example, many of the stories of the Quran, which I'll speak about tomorrow, but I'll just mention one or two, just in passing. You see that on the outside surface of the verses of the Quran, the Prophet had committed a mistake. Error can be attributed to the Prophet if you don't be careful. But we believe, according to the explicit verses of the Quran, that all prophets are ma'soom. And that's why here the prophets, they take the people's weaknesses, the people's corruptive side, the negative aspects of people, and takes it to Allah. But that weakness, that sin of the people isn't attributed to the essence of the Prophet. It's attributed to that lower dimension, in the same way that when the Prophet comes with a message of perfection to the people and reflects divine attributes, those divine attributes aren't attributed to the essence of the Prophet. It's attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those errors aren't attributed to the prophets either. And that's the meaning of being an intermediary between the haqq, truth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the dimension of creation, the worldly dimension, people. And here, now, commentating on verse of the Quran becomes important. And then with each story, when the Prophet goes with the problems of those people to Allah, Allah then gives the Prophet a formula, and those formula always have a spiritual side and a worldly side, and we'll come to that tomorrow inshallah. Now these barzakhi intermediaries, I'll just finish with this, and I apologize for last night, going over the top, but these barzakhi intermediaries between haqq and khalq have a name. It's a Quranic name. These intermediaries are called Al. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Al Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Al Muhammad. Who are the Al? It means household, family, progeny. This Al is divided into two types. One is a familial, family or genetic related Al. And here, many people are included in the family of the Holy Prophet. He had uncles who weren't on the path. And he had people related to him who weren't on the path. But they do qualify as Al in the literal sense, because they're related genetically. It's the family. But then the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt provide a code, a secret. And they tell us what the Al is, so that those negative elements in this first definition of Al, which includes negative and weak members, they are eliminated. This the Holy Prophet has given this tradition, where he said, كل تقي ونقي آلي. All those who have taqwa and are pure, they are my Al. They are my household. And not only does this eliminate those negative members of the genetic family of the Holy Prophet, but then it introduces extra members outside the family coming inside the Al. And most importantly for us, we can also gain access and entrance to be Al Muhammad. And that's of value. The potential is there. So that every salawat which is uttered, you can be in that formula. You can be part of that equation. And those salutations and peace, moment to moment, will enhance your faith. But two things are important: taqwa and purity. Now what these two mean, the degrees of taqwa, the degrees of purity, I've spoken elsewhere. But these are important. And this principle and this code which the Holy Prophet gave, and this equation, is also seen in the Quran. It's a Quranic principle too. In the story of Prophet Noah alayhi salam. Here Allah promised Noah that his Al, the Al of Noah alayhi salam, would be protected from the destruction of the floods, be it the physical floods or the spiritual floods. Then when drowning, when the son of Noah, who was his genetic Al, genetic family, when he was drowning, and the spiritual Al were in the ark, Noah showed affection to his son. Nothing wrong with that. For those who have sons and they're not on the path, instead of pushing them and expressing hostile behavior to them and losing hope in relation to them and always thinking you're superior to them, just calm down a bit and go to their level, respect them. The affection has to always be there. You're responsible for your son. You have to do your best. And daughters, but here in the story here, Nuh alayhi salam still showed affection. He was the prophet. He can't not show perfection. Whoever has an iota of potential to come on the path, Nuh would always, as a prophet, guide them, show affection to them, show compassion to them. Now, okay, maybe some of the children are deviating and then people think it's the end of the world. Now, if you just be compassionate with, especially if they're over 13 or 14, it's finished. Parental guidance ends there. After 13 or 14, you can't be the upper figure anymore. You have to be just two friends. If you want to always have the upper hand, you'll just waste your son, bit by bit. Just two friends now, on equal pegging. Your chance was from 7 to 14. These are approximate dates. There, yes, the story differs there. You have to show them who is the boss in the house. They have to learn that in this sensitive age. And the reason for that is so that when they undergo puberty, with all those a'mal, they understand what submission means. So it's a transition. But after 13, 14 years of age, no, you can't. It won't work. But even if it's too late and your child is, deviated and is over 14, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. That there's still hope always. But compassion is the key there. Anyway, Noah alayhi salam, he still had that compassion for his son. And he said, this is my son. Is there no way for him to come on the path? Then Allah gave the code in the Quran. He said, إِنَّهُ لَيْسَ مِنْ أَهْلِكَ. Verily he's not of your ahl. Ahl means all, the family. See, that's the spiritual all now. إِنَّهُ أَمَلٌ غَيْرُ صَالِحٍ. He is non-righteous actions. It says he is non-righteous. It says he is the possessor of non-righteous actions. He is non-righteous actions. You are your actions. To be part of the spiritual all, you have to have taqwa and purity. So from an external perspective, a fiqhi perspective, yes, someone may be classified as Noah's son. That's okay, from a genetic aspect from it. Someone may be regarded as the prophet's or any prophet's wife, and they would be regarded as a genetic al also. However, the criterion though of to be part of the family, the al, which is destiny building, there the criteria is taqwa and purity. And that's why in relation to Salman alayhi salam, Salmanu minna ahl al-bayt. And we'll speak more about Salman maybe later inshallah. Okay. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala